and welcome to the local campaign. I'm your moderator, Don Pittman. Today we meet with the Ajax Riding candidates vying for your vote in the upcoming June provincial election. Joining us in studio are Ndp candidate Monique Hughes, Green candidate Stephen Leahy, and PC candidate Rod Phillips. Liberal candidate Joe Dixon was unable to attend, but he's provided us with an opening and closing statement that I will read on his behalf. Let's get started by reviewing the rules.
Each candidate will be given 1 minute to make an opening statement. Candidates will be asked to respond to questions in rotating order to ensure fairness. The questions will be provided by Rogers TV and will also include relevant questions submitted by members of the public to the Rogers TV website. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond to each question. Each candidate will be given 30 seconds to provide a rebuttal to another candidate at the moderator's discretion due to time constraints. Each candidate will be given 1 minute to make a closing statement.
And now it's time for the candidates to introduce themselves. As I mentioned, Liberal candidate Joe Dixon was unable to join us, but has sent along this opening statement, which I will read for you now. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard this morning. I am the Liberal candidate Joe Dixon. This morning, my opponents will try to distract you from the reality about our province and the reality about the Ajax Casino. The reality is I have fought for and supported the Ajax Casino before it ever existed during my days as an Ajax councillor, and I will continue to do so. I have also fought for and was successful in securing funding for quarter horse racing in Ajax, period. I am proud to have worked to keep the identity of our Ajax Pickering Hospital and to bring our 20 mental health beds back. Ajax will be home to a new state-of-the-art Grandview Children's Centre and 92 additional beds that are coming to Ballycliffe Long-Term Home Care. I have lived in Ajax my entire life working for you, and I know the PC candidate cannot say the same. On June the 7th, I ask for your vote. And now to the candidates in studio. We'll start with the Ndp candidate, Monique Hughes.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. In 2018, where everything is easy to obtain via a search, who would have thought that owning a home or having a full-time job or going to a dentist that are things that are almost an option? When I decided to run, the Ndp platform was the only platform that sounded like something that was the option of giving me a better future. Dental and pharmacare would be something that all Ontarians would be able to have. One in every Ontarian is not able to take their medication because of cost. And this is sad. So even owning a home, currently, hydro rates are so high. I'm so glad that Andrea Hortha and the Ndp want to cut hydro bills by 30% and bring back hydro into Ontario's hands. Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much. And we'll move over to Stephen Leahy now from the Green Party. Stephen?
Hi. I've lived in Durham for over 30 years, and for the last 25 I've been running my own business as a writer and journalist. I think the Green Party represents the fresh change that Ontario needs. The Green Party is focused on grassroots ideas, so people from all walks of life are invited to contribute their ideas. And for the last 20 years, the Green Party has accumulated some amazing and innovative ideas that can help all Ontarians. So we're talking about green jobs, clean energy, a basic income guarantee, support for local businesses, also support for our local farmers, affordable housing for everyone, and to strengthen our healthcare system. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. And Rod Phillips, Progressive Conservative candidate.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this very important local community forum. Since I moved to Ajax, I've been talking to citizens, to people here in this town about concerns that they have, concerns about their hydro bills being too high, concerns about losing track of local issues, important issues that matter to the people of Ajax, taxes that are too high, regulations that are getting in the way of them being able to live their lives the way they want to. Just as one example, we've lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs in Ontario since the Liberals were in power. Things don't have to be that way. I'll look forward to this discussion where we're going to talk about ideas about how to make things better and make life better for all of us here in Ajax. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rod. And Rod, I'm going to start back with you on the first question. I'm just going to kind of reverse the order since Monique had the opportunity to go first with her statement. So here's the first question. It says Ontario's largest budget expense is the annual, third largest budget expense is the annual interest costs on the money the Government of Ontario has borrowed over the past several years. As interest rates rise, so will the cost. Are you concerned about this cost? And if so, what would your plan be, your party's plan be to deal with it?
Thank you. It's a very important question. Ontario is the largest sub-sovereign debtor in the world. What that means is there's no province or state that owes more money than our province. And what that means is that we're spending $1 billion a month, almost $12 billion on interest every year. And as you said, that's the third largest expenditure in the line. Now, what does that mean? Every $1 billion could be providing 250,000 seniors with home care. It could be hiring thousands of nurses. So clearly we have to start moving in the right direction. The recent Liberal budget, after suggesting that they would balance their budget, then proposed a $6 billion deficit. What's truly disturbing is not just that they are now going back into deficit, which is going to increase that debt, but that they are also contesting how much money they're actually in debt. In fact, the Fiscal Accountability Officer and the Auditor General both disagree and say that that deficit is in fact twice that, $12 billion. So this is clearly an issue that has to be focused on, and it needs to be focused on by bringing some solutions around a more efficient and effective way of running government. We've all heard about the various expenditures of the Liberal government. $9 billion wasted, and these are from the Auditor General. $9 billion because of energy contracts. $8 billion in e-health. $1 billion wasted because of the gas plant scandal. So there is a desperate need to become more efficient and more effective about how we run government, because it needs to be in a position to provide the services for people want. When we have home care waiting lists that just get longer and longer, and long-term care lists longer and longer, the reason we can't solve those problems as quickly as we can is because of the wasted money of the last 15 years. A PC government will address those problems.
Okay, thanks, Rod. Stephen Leahy, the Green Party, what are your thoughts on that question? Would you like the question reread, or are you okay?
I'm okay, thanks.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah. Certainly, we need to manage our money better. The continual investment in mega projects like the Darlington nuclear plant, this is like $13 billion budgeted. It'll end up costing a lot more just to refurbish a plant that's barely 20 years old. That already cost even more than $15 billion to build in the first place. So that's the source of many of the reasons why Ontario is so far in debt. It's some of these poor decisions about things like energy. We can do a lot better by investing in decentralized energy that requires much less money on the part of Ontarians to invest. So for instance, community-based wind and solar projects, the investments come from the community and they get the reward for the generation of the electricity. So there's other approaches. And I think one of the things the Green Party offers is a fresh look, because a lot of folks in the Greens are self-employed in business folks who know how to manage their money, because they wouldn't stay in business very long. And this is particularly important when you're a very, very small business, such as my own. I have to watch every penny I spend, and that's one of the most important things, is to reduce the amount of money you're spending so that you can not have to go find new sources of income. I think that's something that the Greens can offer a new way of dealing with.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Monique?
Could you repeat the question for me?
Sure,
please?
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's Ontario's third largest budget expense is the annual interest cost on the money the Government of Ontario has borrowed over the past several years. As interest rates rise, so will this cost. Are you concerned about this cost? First question, and if so, what would your party plan to deal with it?
Well, definitely my party is concerned about these costs. I don't know the numbers like these two gentlemen, because I'm just, I'm a young woman just trying to make sure that living can be something that we can do. So, but we already know how debt is and how it can stop things from growing. But I do know that the NDP platform, especially if we bring back Hydro One into the public's hands, we will be able to get, receive money from there to help put back into pretty much our debts. We understand that the Liberals for the last 15 years have allowed these situations to come to this point, and all we can do now is find a solution for the problem, which will, and I think that the NDP would probably be the best party to do that with, because we are looking for change for everyone, the rich, the middle class, the poor, and I think that's the NDP has a plan for that.
Okay, very good. Okay, just a reminder that the folks at home are watching on this camera right here, so just remind yourself just to take a quick peek in there. Number two, this one's another cost-based one, and Stephen, I'll start with you on this one because I'm just going to try and come down the line here. It's another cost question. Maybe right up your alley. There's been a great deal of talk about how to rein in the costs for electricity users in Ontario. What's your party's plan for this one?
Well, one of the things is to stop the investments in these super expensive nuclear plants. We could obtain much cheaper electricity from Quebec. Quebec has an enormous surplus of energy that they're selling at only a few pennies a kilowatt to the Americans. For a very small investment, we could get that electricity in Ontario, and it would be far cheaper and easier to do than to continually refurbish and repair our nuclear fleet. The other idea is to have community-based energy programs where people can invest a few $1,000s perhaps into a local wind power generation or solar power generation system that will enable folks to not only get electricity, green electricity, but also make some money as a result. So these are some, I think, fairly obvious things. Keep in mind that Ontario doesn't pay the world's highest electricity rates. Europeans pay much more. Many states pay much more than we do. We've had reasonable electricity rates for the last 20 years, but we could do a lot better than we're doing because we need to have a secure and reliable and long-term plan to deal with our electricity.
Okay, very good. And Monique, I'm going to move down to you, and then we'll go to Rod after that.
Well, I don't completely have a direct answer for this question today, but as I would say, with more education on myself and learning on the details of how this affects us and the costing of it all, that I'd be able to come up with a way that would be efficient for all of us, and that working with Andrea on getting a strong platform or a strong plan, because at the end of the day, it isn't just about saying what you can do, but it's also about knowing that you can do it when you say it.
Okay, very good. Okay, Rod, what are your thoughts on that question?
When I've been out knocking on doors, I've met with many individuals who really are upset about their hydro rates. Those hydro rates have tripled since the Liberals came into power 15 years ago. We do have the highest hydro rates in Canada and some of the highest in North America, and that's a problem for a couple of reasons. All of us as homeowners know that our hydro rates have gone through the roof, and that makes it harder to live in an affordable way. It just has become a real stress on families. It's also bad for business. It's part of the reason that we've lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs over the last 15 years, because the input of power is an important feature of having a competitive business environment. So energy matters. And nuclear is an important part of that solution. It provides close to half of the base load, and of course we here know in Durham Region that it's an important part of the employment base, and it does so on a carbon-free basis. But we have bigger problems as well that we have to deal with. And the immediate priority for a PC government would be looking at hydro rates. Our platform that has been costed would reduce those hydro rates by 12%. We do that in a couple of ways. When the government decided, the Liberal government, and Kathleen Wynne and Joe Dickson decided to sell Hydro One, which was not something they'd campaigned on, they did, as a result, get a dividend from that. So we're going to return that dividend to the ratepayers. We're also going to take some charges off of your hydro bill that really are environmental charges and refund that money to you. So that will get us about a 12% reduction off the top. But we're going to have to focus on this issue. This is an issue that the government has mishandled terribly. Our hydro system is broken. A PC government will clean that up.
Okay, and thanks very much, Rod. Just a reminder that if any of you have a rebuttal or another thought, you've got 30 seconds to do so. Stephen, go ahead.
I'm going to take issue with Rod. I mean, I agree with you that the system needs fixing. The hydro rates have gone up less than 30% since 2006, according to a report from the environmental auditor that we have in Ontario. Yes, we could have done better if we had avoided the nuclear investments. I think the other thing that gets lost in a lot of the talks about hydro rates is we could do a lot more in terms of our energy efficiency, and that's something that both parties have failed on over the last 20 years, is making serious investments in reducing the amount of energy so that our bills will go down.
Okay, go ahead, Rob.
And Stephen, I don't think anybody who's paying a hydro bill at their home doesn't see how dramatic the increase has been. And of course, I was going back 15 years. You were going back a little bit less. I do have to say what you talked about around community energy. I mean, that is a very viable and important solution. So we might disagree on the importance of nuclear. But I think those kinds of grids where energy can flow both ways are part of the future. I know Viridian and others are working in that direction. And I think that is an important option.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Monique, anything to add at all?
I'm okay on this
No?
one. Thank you.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Okay, so Monique, I'm going to come to you with this question now. This is to do with the Ajax casino issue. I guess it's, I've seen some indications that it looks like it's going to close and move over to a new location, and then I guess the town of Ajax won't be quite as much of a beneficiary of the revenue. So here's the question. The town of Ajax is at odds with the province over the decision to approve the Durham Live Casino project in Pickering, which will potentially mean the closure of the Ajax Down Casino and racetrack. Racing quarter horse owners fear that the track closure will lead to an end to their sport in Ontario. So where do you stand on that issue? And now we'll go to Monique Hughes and the NDP.
Well, I stand with keeping it in Ajax. I understand that Pickering is our neighboring city, but I feel like the biggest issue that came from that was that there was no transparency. There was no conversation with the local municipalities to say, hey, this is what we're thinking, this is what we're doing, what do you guys want to do, right? And I feel like the Liberals or Joe Dixon just completely decided not to respect the people of Ajax by saying this, because from what I understand and see, that the revenue that's coming in from that has really benefited Ajax really well. I mean, that benefit has, or revenue I should say, has allowed the second phase of the Audley Centre to be developed. It's kept taxes down in Ajax. And we see the growth and the changes that are happening because of this. And I understand that Pickering is next door, but I feel like this is something that we should keep in Ajax, as well as you've stated that the horse racing is the only still riding that's in Ajax. I think it would be a sad development or service to lose because of selfish decisions by not talking to others.
Okay, very good. And we'll move, Stephen, we'll move over to you next. We'll just go up the line here.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's behind the decision. Personally, I'm not a big fan of gambling. I think there's other ways to, grow our communities, other ways to fund, community programs and centers. There's a lot of downsides that comes with gambling. I mean, that's the part that doesn't get talked a lot about here. There are gambling addicts. I have been to these, been in casinos, and you see, lots and lots of folks who are clearly addicted to putting a few coins in and hoping for some kind of return. I'm not sure that's the way in which we want Ontario as economy to grow. Thanks.
Okay, all right. And Rod, how about you?
It's unfortunate that Joe Dixon wasn't able to be here with us today to speak to this issue. And I think it's a conversation a lot of people in Ajax, including the mayor and the whole council, have been wanting to have. If he had come, I would have asked him about this letter that he signed in 2015, which actually endorsed the Durham Live proposal. And if we're looking for why the casino is going to be moving to Pickering, I guess we have to ask our local MPP, Joe Dixon, why he signed a letter encouraging that it go to Pickering. The implications of this are quite severe, and I think my colleagues here have spoken well to them. $8 million of revenue that will be lost by the town of Ajax. And this is in a case where we all know that our property taxes are very high in Ajax to begin with. Quarter horse racing essentially ended in Canada, and that is not me talking, that's Bob Broadstock and the people who run quarter horse racing saying those things. And finally, significant traffic issues. Church Street, where the location of the casino is proposed in Pickering, near Annandale Golf Course and Curling Club. This is not a street that could handle the up to $10 million or 10 million people that are proposed in the Durham Live proposal easily. And so massive changes would be required there, could very much affect Pickering Village, which is a heritage location. So what do we do about it? I've come forward in support of a proposal that came from the quarter horse racing industry. And of course, we don't know what deal was done 60 days before an election when something like that happens. But this would be a proposal that would essentially have two facilities. It's a proposal that's aligned to what the OLG proposed, the idea of 4 gaming sites in the GTA. It would save quarter horse racing, and it would essentially give people a gaming option, the Ajax Downs option and the Pickering option. Joe Dixon and Kathleen Wynne rejected that. So again, I said I'm sorry that Joe isn't here to explain that, but I think he does have some explaining to do.
Yeah, okay. Stephen, did you have another comment there? I saw you shaking your head.
No, I'm
yeah?
good. I'm good, thanks.
You're good? Okay, very good. Okay, Rod, we're going to bring the next question to you and read it off here. It says, for many Durham residents, the preservation of our greenbelt is high on their priority list. The town of Ajax is urging that the headwaters of Crothers Creek should be added to the greenbelt. Would you support this? Why or why not?
I do. I do. I think there are 2 issues at play here. One is flooding downstream from the headwaters of the Crothers. So as many of the people watching will know, if you develop in an inappropriate way, the volume of water coming down the Crothers Creek will cause flooding in Ajax. And of course, the headwaters are not in Ajax, but this is the nature of the world we very much understand today, which that everything doesn't happen within the simple geographic boundaries of a riding or a town. We have to be more aware of our environment in a comprehensive basis. So we support it for that reason. I also support it because it's unclear why the headwaters of the Crothers weren't included in the Greenbelt to begin with. And unlike the Liberal government that has made 17 changes to the Greenbelt, we've made it clear that we'll protect the existing Greenbelt. But to be clear, what I'm also in favor of is expanding the Greenbelt to include the headwaters of the Crothers, both so that we can protect that vital ecosystem, but also so we can protect residents from any unnecessary flooding.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. Stephen Leahy from the Green Party, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that we need to protect the Crothers headwaters. It should be added to the Greenbelt, and the Greenbelt itself should be, again, protected. And because it's a key part of the ecology of Southern Ontario, it's important to maintain our, some greenery so that we have continued to have flood control, because that's how flooding is presented, because green plants can absorb these kind of heavy rainfall events, which we're getting more and more often. So this is an important step, and it should be done as soon as possible. Whoever happens to be in power, that should be one of the first things they do.
Okay, and Monique Hughes from the NDP, your thoughts?
I agree with what these gentlemen have said, but Rod, I'm pretty sure I've heard Doug mention recently that he wasn't interested, or he was interested on building on the Greenbelt. So with that being said, how do you support the Greenbelt and Crothers Creek, but your leader does not support that? So how are you going to work with him to make sure that this will be done, right?
So great question. I appreciate it. You correctly remember that Doug had said he was looking to create more affordable housing at the Greenbelt. He then got feedback in a way that I think a lot of people found refreshing, where he heard from people across Ontario that Greenbelt was something that they very much wanted to preserve and protect. So he's committed to that and committed to making sure that we connect to that. And I think the important message in that about Doug Ford is that he is a person who listens. He got feedback from people. They reminded him how important the Greenbelt was. Certainly, I'm someone who's always believed it was important. And so I think that's a protection that Ontarians can really count on. And as I said, I think there's obviously room to expand it, particularly when we're preserving vital headwaters.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Stephen, comment.
Should your party be elected in June, does this mean that Doug Ford is not going to revisit the issue of a development in the Greenbelt? I mean, what kind of guarantee do Ontarians have that this isn't going to be another change, that the policy or the ideas suddenly shift again?
Yeah, no, he's been quite clear, and certainly I support him in that clarity that the Greenbelt as it stands will be there. And as I said, I think we need to look back, and it'll be interesting to look back, because it has been 15 years of Liberal government where some of these exemptions, like the Carruthers headwaters, were there, and we're not sure why, because it doesn't make sense. So yes, certainly that's a commitment from me, but it's a commitment from Doug Ford as well if we are fortunate enough to form government.
Okay, very good. Beneath, did you have something to add there?
Well,
No?
I will wait to hear that if he does become the leader.
Okay, very good.
I hope he will stand by his word.
All right, very good. Good point, though, because he did, it's been on Facebook, and there's been a little bit of, I saw an interesting comment, something about the leader needed flip-flops, and I kind of chuckled at that. So, but good point and way to bring it up here. So, okay, on to question number 5, and Stephen, this is your question to start with. It reads, our healthcare system is dealing with a critical backlog of mental health services. What is your party's plan to clear that backlog and ensure that those in need of treatment get what they require? Big question, that one.
That's a tough question, and it's an issue that we've had around for a very long time. Certainly need to devote more time and resources to improving our health care for in the mental health sector. You know, I think we can do a lot more with the community outreach, having not necessarily doctors or psychiatrists involved, but others like a nurse practitioner, but in the mental health field, that can work with groups of people and communities to help them. I think we need to also have ways in which we identify early on people that are having trouble, that are struggling, and provide them with some resources and some assistance so that they can get better sooner. It's an important issue, and we need to, I think, devote a lot of time and energy to it.
Okay, all right, very good, thanks very much. Okay, Rod, we'll go over to you on that question.
This is a really important issue to me. I've been involved in mental health for about 15 years. I first got involved when I was leading a company. It was again called Warren Chappell, later Chappell FGI, but we employed thousands of clinical social workers, psychologists that supported people's mental health in the workplace. Through that, I got involved with Michael Wilson, our former finance minister, and was a vice chair of his global roundtable on mental health. And we've seen progress, which is commendable. But not enough has been done, and that's one of the reasons that the PC party has committed to the largest investment in mental health, $1.9 billion, and that's going to be matched by the federal government as well over the next 10 years to really address not just mental health issues in the health system, but also some of the housing and other related issues. This is an issue that there is a lot of good discussion on in our community. Just a few nights ago, I was privileged to speak at Carrie and Fenn and the Carrie and Fenn Foundation's annual event related to mental health, and it was perhaps the most wonderful way I've spent 2 hours in a very long time, listening to some experts, but also listening to some people with the lived experience about the challenges that are associated with mental health issues. So I do think this is an issue that's time has come. I think we're seeing a focus from all the parties on the importance of this. We have some great resources in our community, like Ontario Shores, just down the road in Whitby, but it's time for an approach to mental health that matches the approach to physical health in terms of looking at it as a system and addressing these issues that affect so many people.
Okay, Rod, thanks very much. Monique Hughes, NDP, what are your thoughts on that question?
Well, I know that the NDP will assure that mental health care for more than 28,000 Ontarians every year will be given. We're also looking into getting more than 2,000 new mental health workers. We also understand that they also need somewhere to live, so we want to give them or give supporting housing for people with mental health. We will cut children mental health wait times to a 30-day max and invest $590 million into this, as well as we will invest $100 million into Ontario dementia strategies. As just with some of this data that I've said here, I know that NDP is very passionate about this, because mental health, once upon a time, may have a look, had a look. It doesn't have a look anymore. It could be any one of us here sitting at this table that are struggling with mental health. So we need to be able to cover all Ontarians, give them a strong foundation to depend on, as well as, while we're giving them that, give them a place to live, and with proper resources. I know that the NDP can do this, and I'm very supportive about this. And I know that living in, I guess, Durham, for the amount of years that I have, well, 26 years, I've seen the changes. I've seen, even amongst my friends and family, seeing how mental health has affected our lives. So it's no longer just a pastime or a conversation that we can keep, hidden behind. I think it's something that we need to bring to the forefront and get help.
Okay, very good. I'm going to add a question to this, and that is, given that all three of you agree that it is a priority, and I'll start with you, Monique, where will this money come from? Because we are in such a financial mess already, it seems to me that we can't go and keep borrowing from the bank to fund these kinds of programs. And the next question sort of speaks to something similar as well. Does the NDP have any thoughts on where they would find funding for that?
Yes. I don't know the details completely of that, but I do know that there is numbers that the NDP has worked into their plan, as well as I know that our budget, when we have calculated that, it's been approved by the finance minister, that he said that these numbers could work. So I know that those numbers are in there. I directly don't have a response to give exactly where those numbers can come from or this money can come from. But again, because Hydro One wasn't something that's in the community's hands, if we bring that dividends back, there's money there that we can use to put into that.
Okay, very good. Stephen, your thoughts?
The Green Party doesn't have a fully costed platform yet. That'll be launched next week, so I don't have specific numbers. However, the Green Party has always been a fiscally conservative, socially progressive movement. So we will have the numbers to make this work, and there is ways in which we can spend less money on some things and divert the funds to things, to more important things like mental health. So there's definitely a way to do it. I think it's just a matter of rearranging our priorities.
Okay, very good. Rod?
I do think Stephen's right, that's part of it. You have to put $1.9 billion, which is, we've made a clear dollar commitment, over 10 years in the context of the healthcare budget. The healthcare budget in Ontario is about 40% of the budget. The total budget of Ontario is almost $140 billion. So that doesn't mean we can take any of this lightly in terms of finding the money, but I think investments in mental health are the exact kind of investments that can lead to a more effective healthcare system elsewhere. It puts people back into the workforce more quickly. It takes people out of kind of other health issues. I remember from my time at Chappelle and working with the professionals there, the comorbidity of many of issues that they had with physical health and mental health. These add considerable costs to our healthcare system. So I'm not as concerned about that expenditure over that period of time when we look at how much we spend on healthcare and how important mental health is. Okay. But obviously, I do think this is a case where those investments will reap savings, just because there'll be we'll be keeping people healthier, keeping them out of hospitals, keeping them out of emergency rooms.
All right, so you see it more as an investment.
I do.
Than an expense. Okay, very good. All right, we are back to Monique. So this is your next question. This one might be kind of close to home with your party. What's your position on a pharmacare plan for all Ontario?
Well, that's one of the biggest parts of pharmacare for our NDP platform. I personally can say that I've worked a lot of jobs over the last 5 years that have been contract positions, or positions that I worked in small businesses that I didn't have the benefit of having health benefits at my workplace. So I pretty much had to just go with the flow, and hopefully I stay healthy and not have to worry about that stuff. But I feel like that's something that we shouldn't have to deal with. I feel like that's something that should be given to all Ontarians. And the NDP platform, this is something that we're so passionate about, because a lot of jobs now come without these benefits. And if we give these to Ontarians through Ontario, that just means that in the corporations, they have money that they can use elsewhere. So that means that they can, instead of paying benefits out to employees, then they can hire more employees, which would make room for more jobs. And pharmacare is just so important to us as well, is the fact that if you have these options, people will be able to take their medication fully. Because we understand if you don't take your antibiotics completely for the 5 days that they suggest you to take, then there's a chance of whatever you had to come back again, or it can cause other effects. So having this pharmacare would be so important, and having a healthier, having healthy people, sounds pretty good to me.
Okay. All right, Stephen, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the Green Party supports universal pharmacare and dental care for all Ontarians. For a lot of the reasons that Monique has expressed. It's an important thing for all of us, for our health. And particularly in the current job situation, the vast majority of Ontarians are finding themselves in where they don't have benefits anymore. Most work now is in contract or part-time or freelance. So that means people have to fund those kinds of costs for drugs and dental care themselves, or go without, and too often they go without. And in the 21st century and in Canada, that's just something that shouldn't happen.
Okay. Rod?
So we will support, as the PC Party, the OHIP Plus program that has been put forward by the current government, which would provide medications to children under the age of 25. A couple of other things that mentioned I think are very important, and I think involve partnerships that we have to build, particularly with pharmacists in the pharmacy sector, which is the use of drugs and the proper use of drugs, and making sure, like Monique said, that people take the full prescription and don't stop early. Those are things that government has not done a good job of partnering with people like pharmacists and others in the medical community that can help educate all of us about the importance of using the drugs correctly. The percentage of drugs that are prescribed but not fully utilized, and then the issues that come back from that can be avoided by a bit of education. And so our party would also partner with pharmacists to make sure that they become very active and proactive parts of making sure that the medication that's being paid for, in the case of children, by the government, or in the case of employers that would be paying for it, but that medication is well used, and that we get the benefits of the drugs that we're all paying for.
Okay, that's great. Monique, you had a comment?
Yes, under 25 sounds like a great idea, but a lot of the people that are under 25 fall under their parents' coverage at that time. But what about the people that are older than that? What about our seniors that pretty much are living off of low incomes or just the bare minimum? So what about them, where they can't even get their full prescriptions for whatever they're taking? This is something where it needs to be more than just under 25, because as I said, I've worked in a lot of fields where I was not able to have that, but it would have been nice to have the option of being able to get it.
I have to cut you off there.
Thank you.
An add-on question to that, and I'll go with you, Monique, first off. If there was a government that was formed that had to work with another government, so a minority government, would you support a situation where we can't afford it now, but we will allow 100% write-off of the cost of prescription drugs against your income? Would you be supportive of that?
What I will have to say is, because this is an Ajax Riding debate, I would definitely have to speak to the people of Ajax and see if that's something that benefits them. Again, transparency, having a conversation, that's something that when we elect people into positions, I think that's the reason why we do that. So yes. Yeah,
great answer.
Well, if it's something like a minority government, then some progress on this file would be great. I agree with Monique, the under 25 isn't very applicable to someone like myself who's no longer under 25 and has to pay for his own dental and drugs. So if the write-off would be helpful, but it's not going to work for most people who are making our minimum wage. That kind of income tax write-off doesn't really make that much of a difference. It doesn't offset the cost as much as you might think.
Yeah. Rod, your thoughts?
I think we'd have to look at any options that made sense. It really does come down to affordability and how do we make it easier for people to live the lives they want to with the considerable cost now of hydro and the tax rates that we're living with. So I think any option would be worth looking at.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Okay, Monique, I'm sorry, Stephen, I'm coming back to you. This question, what is your position on the recent hike in the minimum wage, and where do you see your party taking that?
Well, it's been an important adjustment, I think, for everyone in Ontario, but a necessary one because, I've had kids who've had to work on minimum wage and, clearly they could not pay for their rent and their food on that. So we've needed to move it up, and it's great that we have. Although the Green Party believes that the move to $15 next year might be, a bridge too far at this point. So not to say that $15 isn't enough or is too much. What it is how do we help small businesses cope with that additional cost? So the Green Party has ideas about how to help small businesses deal with this additional cost by things like reducing their employment tax or their employment benefit taxes, so that we can be supportive in what is a very necessary step to help Ontarians make a fair wage. And I think that's probably the sensible and best approach.
Very good. Okay, Rod, your thoughts?
We have a very specific proposal. Obviously, the $14 minimum wage was brought in abruptly. It was brought in a way that was very difficult for many businesses because the government, the Liberal government under Kathleen Wynne and Joe Dickson, had one position a year before the election, which was going to be raises in the minimum wage based on the rate of inflation, and then 6 months later decided to make a 22% increase in it. But that said, I have talked to many people in Ajax and elsewhere, and it's important that people have enough money to live the lives they want to live. But the next dollar, what we've said is that instead of putting that on employers, because when we put that on employers this time, it cost people jobs. It cost people with part-time jobs hours, so they're not getting as much money in some cases as they used to. But what we're going to do is eliminate income tax on those who are making minimum wage. So put it on the government. We think it is a noble objective to try to make sure that people who are living on minimum wage, which is tough, which is really tough, but make sure that it is easier for them. But we're going to do that instead of on the backs of employers who've already had to absorb this significant increase, over 20%, but make government handle that by eliminating income tax for those individuals. That's our proposal, that's our specific plan, and it's been very well received when I've spoken to people at the doors.
Monique?
The NDP would like to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour to tie the future increase let me get this word out, inflation. And we will remove the minimum wage exceptions that are on students or servers that are paid less and throughout the province. Also, we believe that the best way to the government to support small businesses is by giving them the option, or we should be buying their goods. The NDP is really about, they have a really strong platform about the youth, so that when our youth are coming out of jobs, out of school, that there will be jobs for them. So even if they're starting out on $15 an hour, at least there is a job for them to come out to. And the NDP has a strong platform for that.
Okay, very good. Rod, just on that, another question I guess comes to mind for me. Does the party see a sustainable program to escalate the minimum wage so that it kind of keeps track of inflation? It had fallen way behind. I believe the last minimum wage increase was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 8 or 9 years. It was quite a long time. Do you see something sustainable going forward? In fairness to business, and I'm a business guy, or used to be, I'm retired now, there was this huge absorption hit of that, $11 or $11.40 to $14, but that's only because it wasn't moved along the way. Does the party have a platform, I'll start with you, on a sustainable way to deal with that?
So it's the right question, because again, it was strange that this government that had been in power for 15 years suddenly decided that the minimum wage was too low when they've been responsible for the minimum wage for the last 15 years. And to do it in 6 months was although important for individuals, and I can't disagree with, but the way they did it. So many things that this government does, it's the way they do it. They've just lost the ability to talk to stakeholders. They've lost their way on these sorts of things. So we don't want to make the same mistake. So we will make the steps we've taken. We'll eliminate the tax on those who have who make minimum wage. That will be roughly the equivalent of that rise to $15. And then we're going to work with stakeholders. We're going to talk to business. Many of the business people I've talked to they agree with some of the changes that need to be made. Some they disagree with, but they agree with them. But we can't just drop them on them. So this is the kind of proposal we'll talk with them. We'll sort something out, and then we'll be consistent. Because as you know, business people and individuals in their family lives like to know what's going to be coming, and so things like a regular increase against the cost of living would be an important option.
Okay, I'm just going to come down the table. Stephen, any other comment on that at all?
It's an important issue that I think needs to be, constantly addressed. I think we need to consider the needs of folks so that we don't have this situation where we have working poor, particularly when it comes to the super expensive housing in the GTA area. I mean, I meet students all the time and they say, there's no way I could ever live in Ajax. I'm going to have to move someplace else, wherever that, I'm not even sure where that place is now. Because they're going to start off working at a minimum wage. So this is really a key issue.
Okay. Monique, I saw your hand go up there, but you might as well just use your opportunity to answer the question.
I guess maybe a rebuttal to Rod. I guess from doing a little research on you, you've been in corporate or a corporate leader for a long period of time. How people that worked under you, did you not see, or was there ever a concern, or is it just more than now that you're at this table now and you're having a conversation because you were a leader, you are a person that makes decisions, that makes choices. What was your thought process about that?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a great question, and thank you. The kinds of organizations I ran, whether it was the OLG or Chappelle FGI, I mean, the case of Chappelle FGI, the clinical psychologists, these weren't people who were making minimum wage. And I know it wasn't what you meant, Stephen, but it is absolutely true that it's an issue not just for students. I mean, we know there's a lot of people across a lot of areas making that. So that's always been an area that I've tried to make sure that we could pay as fairly as we could and pay people well. It's not just a recent concern. Now in government, or as people who want to be in government, we have to think about the rules that we put in place for businesses in general, and that's what I think is the important focus.
Yeah, out of time. Okay. Any other comments along the way? Or if not, we're going to move down. And Rod, this is going to be your question. Increases in tuition are rapidly putting post-secondary education out of the reach of many. How would your party address the high cost of university and college? I just spoke to one of our volunteers in the studio before we got started, and she was telling me her tuition is about $8,000 a year, which I had to pick myself up off the floor when I found that out.
So those of us who have, it's been a little while since we went to school, it is a very much a different environment in terms of cost. And one of the things that we've committed to is to make sure that education, post-secondary education, both college and university, is affordable through loans and through grants that can be available to students. What's also evolved, of course, is I guess I'd call it different pricing. So some of our universities, particularly for some professional programs, the expense has become quite high. So I think we have to make sure that students have a reasonable chance to earn back the money in the case of borrowing, and obviously we'll keep all those programs in place. And then look as well for partnerships in the private sector. I hear a great deal from employers about the kind of skilled workers they want, and the question I always say back to them is, well, what are you doing then to support and encourage people to be able to work in the field? And we have some great examples like in Durham College, for example, locally and otherwise, where we do that well, and where frankly local corporations have engaged that way. But I think this has to be a partnership, because those young people getting those jobs are creating the economy of the future and letting those businesses thrive.
Okay, very good. Okay, Kevin, go ahead. Or Stephen, sorry. Kevin Leahy. No, Stephen.
No, not today.
Stephen from the Green.
Yes. Thanks. Yeah, this is another important issue. I mean, the future of Ontario is its students, its youth, and we should be providing every opportunity for them to better themselves, to learn about various fields that they're interested in. I mean, a lot of countries around the world that are far less rich than Canada offer free tuition because they understand this is an investment in the country's future. And I think that's the way in which we need to think about it. How best to invest in our youth, certainly by providing as low a cost education as possible, but the highest quality is, you know, just sensible. I mean, really just plain sensible. So yes, grants and loans, but we also need to invest more money in our post-secondary institutions so that the costs for students, not, you know, we don't want them leaving colleges and universities with $50,000 in debt either. And that's the kind of nightmare situation in the US. And $50,000 is probably very low compared for some places. So we need to do, you know, invest, and that's something the Green Party is prepared to do, is make better investments in our public education system.
Okay, very good. Madi?
Well, this is something I'm really passionate about.
I can tell. I can tell.
Being a young adult, understanding the struggles of working and going to school and trying to make ends meet, as well as textbook costs and trying to have a social life on top of that, is something that is really important. And the NDP platform is willing to change loans into grants. And those who are paying interest on it now, stop the interest and give it back to people, the students, as well as opening up co-op placements for students in their job placements so that they can have jobs after. It's really a sad situation to know that the future really doesn't have a plan, or like, it's almost like we're just walking day by day and hoping that something will happen. You know, I'm still at my mom's home, my parents' home, God bless, thank you very much for that, because you know what, I still have student loan debts that I'm still paying for. Trying to just make ends meet. It's almost like our leaders completely forgot about the next generation and who's supposed to take the next step. And I think the biggest heartache that I have is a lot of times our leaders are people that don't even understand or live through what's happening, right? As I said a little earlier, we have a self-employed man here, and then we have a corporate man here.
Okay.
The lives and the struggles are completely different.
Okay, you're out of time. Good response. Okay, we're going to move. Was there any more comment on that? No? Okay, we're going to move up to Stephen. I'm going to go to you on this question. This one probably hits close to home. What is your position on the carbon tax currently being paid by Ontario taxpayers and the future of that tax?
Oh, carbon tax, that's very topical. First of all, we just started to pay the carbon tax, so if it's a 1 cent on your gas price, you know, that's all the increase that it amounts to, because it's a very low amount at this point. Gas prices go up, what, 30–40% over 6 months a year. So this is a tiny increase in what gasoline will cost. We need a carbon tax or carbon price to get us off of fossil fuels. We have to begin to pay the debt of pollution. So we're facing a huge issue with climate change, with all sorts of expensive impacts in terms of flooding or storms. And the only way we're going to be able to move away from that is to pay the real cost of burning fossil fuels. Carbon taxes, cap and trade are just two tools. Additional regulations to improve our energy efficiency will save people money and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is an important thing we have to do, not just for ourselves, but for the future and for future generations. Because once CO2 is up in the atmosphere, you can't get it out. It's there forever. So the only way to have a stable climate for our children and grandchildren is to stop putting the stuff up in the air in the first place. But that's going to be difficult, and we need to put tools in place that'll help us move away as fast as possible from fossil fuels. Okay, very good. Monique, your thoughts?
Yes, the NDP will update the environmental bill, as well as 25% of the cap and trade revenues will go to supporting lower income rural and northern households for trade exposed industries, as well as sorry, just drawing a complete blank here. Yeah, these are things that we want to do.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry about that.
This is a place, and you've heard a couple here where party positions are different. We are against the carbon tax. We would join Saskatchewan, likely Alberta and other provinces in fighting against that. And here's why. It's going to add roughly 4 cents to start to the price of a litre of gas. But if you understand the economics of how carbon pricing works, and I'm quite certain my colleague beside me does, that needs to escalate significantly to actually have the desired impact. So when you look at the studies that have been done by economists around what level of tax you'd have to achieve to affect that behavior change, it can be 3 and 4 times that. And our assessment right now is that affordability is a really big issue for Ontarians. Increasing the price of gas by 4 cents when there's already close to 40 cents a tax on it is just another tax. We do need to seriously look at the various ways to make sure that we manage the environment more effectively, but putting more strain on working people in terms of driving, and particularly in a town like Ajax, in a region like Durham, where so many of us use our cars to get around, just doesn't seem fair or the right thing to do right now.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, go ahead.
So you're kicking the can down the road, saying, okay, you guys, the young people out there in the audience, you got to have to deal with the nightmare of, an extreme climate that's going to cost billions of dollars in damages and be far more expensive to deal with, because sucking carbon out of the atmosphere is far more expensive than stopping it from getting there in the first place. That's a totally irresponsible move.
So I guess in my experience, just because there's a problem doesn't mean that every solution is the right solution. I don't believe, for the reasons I said, and it's just a difference of opinion, that the carbon tax at the level that we're talking about is going to modify behavior. I think it would have to be 3 to 4 times that. So we're talking about raising gas prices by 15, 18, 20 cents a litre. And the example of this is really in some of the other government's this Liberal government's failed initiatives. Kathleen Wynne and Joe Dickson wasted $9.2 billion on green energy programs. And the Auditor General, that's not the PC party or the Green Party speaking, that's them speaking, saying they tried to create a windmill industry on the same kind of premise. So I agree with you about the problem. I don't agree about the solution. It is something we have to address, but I do not think that laying a carbon tax on is the right thing now.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Go ahead.
Well, the carbon tax is going to ratchet up in cost because that's making it easy, just like we've increased the other things in terms of prices over time, to make it easier for folks to adjust to. So the adjustment is not to buy a bigger car that's going to consume more gasoline and therefore pay more carbon tax. And this is what they've done in BC. They've had a carbon tax for over 5 years, and it's been very successful in reducing their emissions. And it has brought money into people's pockets because it's a revenue neutral carbon tax that provides people with a rebate. It's done the job of reducing emissions, and people actually like it. It's probably the only tax in Canada that people like.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Stephen. I'd like to move on to the next question if I could, and it actually kind of speaks to what comes out of the carbon tax, and that is, do you believe, and this actually, Monique, this is going to you first, do you believe electric vehicles over $50,000 retail should qualify for purchase subsidies?
I believe our platform says anybody that spends purchases a car over $90,000 will be paying fees or being paid for certain type of fees. Subsidies, I'm sure it's a great idea, but if the fact that you can afford a car at that rate or that cost, all to you. We'll have to see. I would have to look more into that.
So look and see attitude on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Stephen?
So the $50,000 cap on subsidy, I mean, first of all, there are definitely electric vehicles you can buy for less than $50,000. There's not a lot of them. The problem right now is supply. So there's, GM has one, and another, Nissan, another big automaker, but you can't actually get one because they don't have any in stock. That's how popular there are. $50K is maybe a bit low, given the cost of this new technology, which we need to encourage. So I would put a time limit on it, and this is something the Green Party would say, is in the near future, 2-3 years max, electric cars will be a lot cheaper than fossil fuel cars, simply because they're easier to make, there's a lot less parts to them, the batteries will be a lot better, and we'll have charging stations everywhere. So then that subsidy can be removed because these new technologies will be capable of providing us with the transportation we need at a much lower cost. Keep in mind that, you know, things like huge amount of fossil fuel subsidies, so $3.2 billion every year goes to fossil fuel company, paid by taxpayers. So there already is a subsidy in the other car industry. So we need to help out the new car industry so that we can get the benefits of cleaner air and reduced emissions that are wrecking our climate.
Okay, good point on the other side of the subsidies on the fossil fuel. Yeah, go ahead, Rod.
I agree with Stephen that, although I can't see the future, that the price of batteries and the price of electric cars is going to come down. I don't believe that we should be giving subsidies to individuals who can afford a $50,000 car. That doesn't sync with my experience when I talk to people around Ajax, and people are having to make different choices around even paying a hydro bill and what they're going to be able to buy in terms of groceries. I just can't condone subsidizing someone who has the ability to buy a $50,000 car while that's still going on.
Okay, very good. Rod, I'm going to come to a question with you now. Do you believe Ontario is open for business, and why?
Well, I mentioned in my opening comment that we've lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs in the last 15 years, and that's because of specific decisions that have been made by the Liberal government that have affected things like tax rates and hydro rates and regulation. So no, today Ontario is not open for business, and we're seeing the effect of that. We're seeing jobs continue to migrate. We are seeing particularly skilled jobs in the manufacturing sector less and less available, and we are seeing increasingly the jobs that are available are being paid for by the taxpayer in some fashion as part of a government role. So that's not a sustainable course. We need to create an economy, and we've proposed initiatives like reducing, by a relatively modest amount, but reducing the corporate tax rate from 11.5% to 10.5%. That's in response to the reality that in the surrounding jurisdictions like Michigan and New York State and across the entire United States, because of some very dramatic tax changes, which whether we think they're a good idea or not, they've done, that's the other jurisdictions where businesses have an opportunity to move to. As been mentioned, I'm a business person in addition to someone who's been involved in the community. I've had my own businesses, I've run larger businesses, but these are the kinds of decisions that decide whether there are going to be jobs in Ajax. And so we have to move to a situation where we are open for business. That's going to be good for employees and all of our communities, where we can have a more vibrant community, and it's going to help with things like the property taxes, which so many people talk about. Part of the reason the property taxes are so high in Ajax is because of the absence of a commercial tax base in Ajax. If we're going to attract those businesses, we need a business-friendly environment. We don't have one today. A PC government would bring that.
Okay, great. Stephen Leahy, the Green Party, your thoughts?
Well, the biggest reason manufacturing has disappeared from Canada is free trade. I mean, simply other countries make the stuff we used to make. I mean, that's pretty well documented and just common sense. Since we all still have the same kind of stuff, they're just made in China and elsewhere. What the Green Party is looking at is the future. So where is the puck going, as the great Gretzky said? Green jobs, clean jobs, the high-tech sector, ways in which we can use our energy more efficiently, ways in which we can provide efficiency, ways in which we can have a long-term prosperity. So those are the kinds of things that we want to look to, and we're looking for ideas from the public as well, of course. That's one of the things about the Green Party. Every idea comes from the public, comes from ordinary folks, not policy wonks. It comes from regular people who are facing problems every day and come up with creative solutions. And that's the kind of thing that I think we need more of, less top-down policy analysis stuff and more from ordinary folks. Thanks.
Okay, Monique?
Yeah, we need to stop sending our jobs overseas and keep them here. As we've talked about quite a bit today, that we need to give back to our community, our people, because without jobs, then people can't afford to pay for certain things, right? So I don't believe we're open for business.
Oh, okay. To Stephen's point, because free trade has allowed, less expensive labor costs to figure into it, so it's cheaper to send it to Mexico or overseas, and even inclusive of the transport. How do we fix that? Like, how does a government in power, how do you deal with that?
Is that to me?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just continuing the conversation here.
Oh, okay. How do we fix that? Again, having a conversation. I know that I worked with a firm or a company that manufactured a lot of products in China, and I realized how low of a cost it was to manufacture, and then what we sold it was a whole different ballgame. But if we can use that and bring it back home to us, and I know that we could be able to benefit from that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any thoughts on that, Stephen?
I
Yourself?
think
It's a very complex problem.
it is a difficult challenge. I mean, support for local businesses, I think, is a key part, because that is, and entrepreneurs who are starting up, because that's where the next great idea is going to come from. Some of the manufacturing jobs, we're never going to get those back, but we can do a whole bunch of other things, and we are doing a lot of interesting and innovative things. So support for that innovation, and making it easier for folks to get loans, removing obstacles, providing sort of technical help regarding how to set up a business, how to operate a business. That kind of entrepreneurial assistance is, I think, key to keeping Ontario growing.
Okay. Rod, your thoughts?
I meet a lot of individuals who run their own businesses. We need to treat them like the innovators that they are. They are the people, when they start to make that investment, that create the business that employs people. So dramatic changes in things like the labor laws and the wage laws, those are the kinds of things that dissuade people from taking that risk. When it comes to Durham, one of the issues is the lack of employment in Durham. So many of us have to travel. So many people travel outside of Durham. And I remember, and some of the others will remember, when we had people like a Jim Flaherty and Janet Ecker that were representing us provincially, when we got things like universities built here, and we got other important infrastructure and facilities built here that provided those jobs. So overall, you need a competitive environment. That's why we've proposed reducing the tax on business people, and I think that will help. We need to provide a stable environment so people know what their wage costs are going to be and they aren't dramatically changing, or other parts around their work. And we need advocates in Durham that, like they used to when Jim Flaherty was here, would pound the table to make sure that Durham got its share. And that's not been happening for the last 15 years.
Yeah, very good. Okay, I'm going to move down to the end of the table. Monique, this question is going to, this has been going on for years, but I love asking this question. Are you supportive of a future Pickering Airport, yes or no, and why?
No. And
Okay.
that's what I will stand by, no.
Okay.
And that, because I believe that the idea of the Pickering Airport is supposed to be in our farming area or our greenbelt area, so I'm not for it. And I know the NDP stands for that too.
Okay, very good. Okay, Stephen?
Yes, also the Green Party is opposed to the Pickering Airport. It's a lovely green area right now. We don't have that many green areas. We have the green belt to the north, but we need something that goes from north to south, and that's what that particular part of Pickering provides. It's actually a very productive farming area, and that's something we need also, is to be able to grow more food locally, so we don't have these huge transport costs. And the airport in Pearson is, seemingly doing pretty well. It's how much air traffic is going to increase in the future is largely dependent on the ability of the airline industry to develop fossil fuel-free flying, and that's a long ways off. So there will be limitations on the future of flying until we have that particular problem solved.
Okay, very good. Rod, your thoughts?
Airports are an important part of the transportation hub. We have a couple of major airports in the GTA. What's ongoing right now is a study by the federal government that I would like to see the results of, that actually talks about the environmental impacts, the business case. Of course, the federal government are the ones who actually make a decision about airports. I think this is a decision we've not been making for 40 years, but I would want to wait and see the facts coming out of that study before I made a decision.
Okay, all right, very good. Alrighty, I'm going to put this to you, Rod. It says many residents were outraged upon learning that the 412, which links Highway 401 and 407, would be a pay-per-use highway. Should the 412 be a free highway, and how would your party go about making the necessary changes to make that happen?
You know, I've heard that as well, and I've experienced, because the 412 ran for a while for free, and of course a lot of people used it then, which was great, and now if you are one of the people who drive up and down that, you'll notice that it isn't very busy. This is particularly upsetting because 412 and the next highway being built, only the highways in Durham, and this gets back to my point about Durham and how it's been treated, and asking the question, what have its political representatives been doing, are the only toll highways, the proposed highway and 412, are the only two toll highways that go onto the 400 series highways. So we certainly will look at that. Obviously, one of the questions one has to understand is the financial underpinning of what is it that affects that. Remember, it is rolling onto a toll highway, and a toll highway that the province owns the portion of its tolling. So it begs the question, you know, if most of the people using the 412 are going to go use the 407 and pay for it anyway, why is it we're making it difficult to make that a transportation artery when we need one so badly? So it's absolutely something that we will look closely at.
Okay, Stephen, your thoughts?
Well, toll roads are something that are hotly debated, and there's a question whether we need them at all. I would prefer to see investments in transit instead of more highways, because all that'll happen is the 412 would get jammed up if it becomes a free road again. So the way of getting out of traffic isn't by building more highways, it's by creating other options so that folks can move around much easier. So things like if the 412 had a dedicated lane for, let's say, buses, that would be a big improvement. I think that would be more important than the tolling issue, because that'd be a faster way for people to move around cheaper so that they don't have to own cars, because cars are really expensive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Monique, your thoughts?
Well, I don't know the platform or Andrea's thoughts on the 412, but I do know that the 407 doesn't belong to Ontarians. So the people that are putting that expense into that is not even going back to us. So we should, I definitely know I want to speak to her in regards to that if I am the MPP of Ajax, as well as speak to the people. From myself being a Durham citizen, I know that it would have been nice for it to continue to be free so that you can get up north on an easier path, because on the other routes or regional routes or roads that we have, it can become very congested during rush hour. And we, as you know, and people now that it's the summer, people are going up to their cottages, and they're, you know, like the traffic in Durham is something to speak about. So I don't know if she has even had a conversation about it, so I'm open to speaking to her about that.
Okay, very good. Okay, Monique, I'm going to come to you. This may be our last question, depending on timing. It's another health care question. Do you believe that Ontario should have a basic dental care plan for its residents?
I believe we should. This is another part of the platform of Ndp that we want to have for all Ontarians. Again, if you have things that our citizens can use for free, then they'll take advantage of. Going to a dentist should not be an option. It should be something that we all can have, because once you have a healthier mouth or a healthier life, then there's less reasons that people be on prescriptions, right? There's no reason for me to choose of getting my wisdom teeth taken out or paying the mortgage or paying for childcare, because pretty much the costs could be very similar, right? Taking out a wisdom teeth now can cost you anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000. And then that means, okay, I got to take this tooth out because it hurts, but that means I got to get a small loan to pay for it. So it just keeps putting us in this spiral that just keeps going and going and going. And if you're making minimum wage already, or you're just trying to make ends meet, where do you go? You know, it's almost like instead of at this time pushing us forward, we just keep pushing ourselves back. So if we can help the community out and help each other out, I think things would be a lot better for us.
Okay. Stephen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Monique. The Green Party supports a basic dental health program. One of the other things the Green Party supports is a universal income guarantee, so everyone would get a basic income. It would do a lot to take away some of that anxiety about whether or not I can make my next rental payment or have enough money at the end of the week for food. It would replace a lot of our social welfare things like employment insurance. And most studies show this would be a lot cheaper. There's an experiment going on in Ontario right now, and many other countries as well. It's something that is time for it to be part of, I think, the Ontario landscape.
Okay. Rod Phillips, what do you think?
You know, governing's about making choices, and while free dental care would certainly benefit a lot of people, we've made different choices in terms of the commitments that we're going to make. We're focusing on building long-term care beds, and you know, 15,000 new beds, and then 30,000 following, and that's because we're quite focused on the problem of hallway medicine. The issues I hear when I talk to people in Ajax are about the jammed hospital that we have, that hasn't been given enough money to expand, and that has too many people that aren't getting primary service, and in many ways because we haven't opened up long-term care beds so that those people can be served more efficiently, but also more compassionately and not in the hallway of our hospital. So we've made different choices about the things that we'd invest in, and I guess I have to go back to all of these things would be easier if we hadn't wasted, you know, $8 billion on e-health or $1 billion on gas plants. These are the kinds of wastes that actually mean that we have fewer nurses, that we have less availability of home care and long-term care, and a PC government would be managing things in such a way that your tax dollars and your precious tax dollars would be spent on the priorities that we think Ontarians have.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Rod. Well, we're coming to the end of our debate, and I'd like to thank all of the candidates who participated here today. It's time for our closing statements. Once again, I will begin by reading a closing statement from the Liberal candidate, Joe Dixon, who is unable to join us today. So here's Joe's statement. I've lived in Ajax my entire life. I have had the opportunity through my local business, volunteering, serving on Ajax Council, and as an MPP for 2 terms to listen and advocate for the people of Ajax. It's been an honor to do so. Together, we have introduced full-day kindergarten, publicly funded prescriptions for youth, huge investments in healthcare and developmental services, rebuilt our public schools, have the highest graduation rates, publicly funded tuition, pushed the country along on a pension, and we fought for a fair minimum wage. Even though we have the lowest unemployment in 20 years, the best growth in the G7, we need to do more. We need to take care for each other, work together, as Ajax knows I have done. Together we will expand pharmacare to seniors, create publicly funded preschool childcare, and make planned investments in mental health care in the hospitals and seniors care. On June 7th, vote Joe Dixon. Let's continue to work hard together. And now a closing statement from our PC candidate, Rod Phillips. Rod?
Well, first, thank you, Don, for hosting. I think you kept us all in line, and hopefully that wasn't too difficult. Thanks to my colleagues here. It's no small thing to decide to run for office. As a first-time person doing that myself, I can tell you. It's unfortunate that Joe Dixon couldn't be with us today. Monique and I guess, have been to 2 debates now, and counting where he hasn't been able to attend. But I think what I hear from residents of Ajax is that they see a government in the Liberal government of Kathleen Wynne and Joe Dixon that has simply lost its way. It has become a government that is focused on insiders, that's focused on deals, that's focused on poorly managing our money, to the point where the Auditor General and the Financial Accountability Officer are actually calling them out, and where there's real questions about why decisions are being made. Those decisions also relate to things that are happening locally. Ajax Downs, and why that has to be moving to Pickering, and why Joe Dixon supports it moving to Pickering. As your candidate, I hope to be elected in Ajax. I ask for your vote, and we'll give you accountable, responsible government.
Okay, thanks, Rod. Just have 1 minute, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to thank everyone for organizing this and for participants. I'm hoping the folks in Ontario will give the Green Party a close look. It's the only party that has a lot of innovative ideas. It sees where we're heading in terms of a green and clean future. And I think within that, we can build and create a green middle class that's going to embrace this new clean economy by focusing on local businesses and making homes and home care way more affordable. There is no planet B. We have to tackle climate change. We don't have any choice, and we certainly can't dump the problem that we created on our children and grandchildren. So we can create a new economy, a new green economy, if we all work together to find ways in which we can reduce carbon pollution and achieve prosperity. So I hope you will give the Green Party a good look in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Stephen Leahy, thanks very much from the Green Party. And Monique Hughes, the NDP. Last word.
Okay. Again, thank you for having me today and the rest of us. It was great speaking with you guys today. But I believe that we keep switching from the Liberals to Conservatives, and life keeps getting harder. Let's stop settling for bad or worse. I think it's time for change. And I think it's time for change for the better. I am not your typical politician, but I know that with the heart that I have and the passion that I have to serve people, I know that I can be the MPP or the next MPP that is for the people, where somebody that's reachable, that's someone that's open to hearing our concerns. So it's not about just saying the right things, but it's about doing the right things. I want to be that person from the youngest to the oldest that you can communicate with me. This is an open platform, and I'm here to learn, I'm here to observe, and I'm here to be the voice of Ajax. So I'm hoping that on June 7th that you will vote for me, Monique Hughes, on Election Day.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. And that concludes our debate featuring the candidates for the Ajax Riding. I'm Don Pittman. Thanks for watching. Tune in to Rogers TV on election night for your local results. I'll see you there. And be sure to cast your ballot on June the 7th. This is an important election coming up. Bye for now.